If you've already got an LS engine or you're planning on swapping one into another car, you might want to have a look at your engine loom because it might not be as nice as you think. Hey guys, Pat from Aeroflow Performance. And yes, I know it looks like there's a giant bunch of wires on the desk, and as someone who hates wiring, this is giving me anxiety, but I guarantee you this is going to solve your problems. We're going to make things a lot easier for you. This right here is actually a complete GM LS engine harness. This particular one is for the E38 ECU, which you'll find in Australian cars. You'll find in VE and VF Commodores. So it's the later version of the ECU, which is extremely flexible when it comes to tuning. There's so many cars out there that are running crazy horsepower, or being used in track work, or just street cars that are running that factory ECU, because tuners all over the world know how flexible it is and how easy it is to tune. So the E38 is a great start. This particular one is for that ECU. We also have the earlier version as well, which would come in a Gen 3 car, so an LS1 powered car or LS6 potentially, that has the two plugs, the blue and the red plug, that go into the ECU. So the easiest way to identify what you've got is looking at these plugs, these connectors that go into the ECU itself. E38, the later model, has the black plugs, and then the earlier version has a blue and a red plug that's quite long. So why would we have these? Well, basically the same as any other reason why you change something on an LS motor now. It's the engines are getting quite old, so as a result the harnesses are getting quite old. Your plugs are going to start to get brittle and break when you disconnect things and reconnect things. The connections, maybe it's been in and out of a car a couple of times. You might have found an engine from a wrecker, or spare parts. You don't know the history of it, so it's always a little bit of a gamble using a second hand or an older wiring loom when it comes to consistency. So this basically allows you to buy a brand new loom that will fit onto the motor, and it will allow you to adapt into whatever the application is that you've got, whether it's to replace an old loom in a vehicle that was originally fitted with this engine, or if it's to do an engine swap into a different chassis and you need to start with a wiring loom somewhere. So rather than starting from scratch, this basically gives you all the main points. You don't have to worry about a body control module, immobilizer or anything like that. Effectively, you can just put power to the starter, and then at the other end you've got an ignition switch of some sort, whether it's a generic one or an ignition barrel in a vehicle, and you're away. So it takes all of the guesswork out of what bits did I forget to put in my custom loom, and also just allows you to start with fresh clean unit that everything's brand new and it's good to go. What I'll do is I'm going to walk you through basically the start to finish of the loom, and I'm also going to point out some of the additional harnesses that we have in our range that can aid you in that complete swap or upgrading your original engine. So if we start from the beginning, or what I call the beginning, we've got the ECU connector. So they basically plug into the factory ECU, locked down, exactly the same operation as your original situation. From there, we move on to what we call the under dash components of the harness. So you've got a small fuse block, some relays, your OBD2 port, or the plug, and also, being that it's an E38 ECU, there is drive-by-wire throttle control. So this is the plug for the electric pedal, as opposed to a cable-driven pedal. So if you're utilising that, this plug is designed to suit a GM LS7 plug, which was used in quite a lot of different models. It's not a direct fit for a VE or a VF Commodore if you're putting this into an Australian delivered vehicle. However, the pinouts are all readily available, so you can take this plug off, you can modify it, you can change it to utilise whatever pedal you like, or you can locate one of those LS7 style pedals if you want to use drive-by-wire in your engine swap. You can also just not use that at all and terminate it and run a cable-driven throttle. So that's everything under the dash effectively, or the firewall, wherever you mount your ECU. Then we move on to this firewall grommet. So this is basically where the harness is designed to run through the firewall. We have these grommets, we have them as a separate unit as well. So if you need multiple ones, if you damage them, if you Even if you're modifying this loom and you remove that, you might need another one. That's a separate product. We'll put a link in the description. So that's all there. As we move on, we're coming back up to, this is your starter, your grounds and your activation plug or signal wires for the starter. We're going to move on to the cylinder head bank. So this one here has a couple of different options on it, which I'm going to walk through with you. As you can see, coming off the main loom, we've got your injector plugs. So these are what's called a USCAR plug, and that's going to go straight into a Gen 4 injector. So that's the factory original style injectors. They're a shorter injector, so you can find those and identify them easily. If you don't run that style of injector with the USCAR plug on it, we do also have adapters. So as you can see with this one, I've actually plugged in one of our little adapters which goes from USCAR loom, or let's say LS3 loom, to an EV1 Bosch injector, which is a very common design of injector plug. You'll see that in universal applications, factory applications. Quite a lot of the injectors available on the market are either an EV1 or a USCAR plug. So that's going to suit, I would probably say, 90% of the injectors that you're going to use in one of these applications. So they just basically clip straight in, which being a brand new plug, it's going to be difficult for me to pull it all the way out. There we go. So that's a USCAR straight into EV1. It's ready to go. It's got the spring clip on there, which will work on the injector side. Moving on from the injectors on the cylinder head, on the loom you also have this LS coil sub harness plug. So as you can see, that's your factory sub harness plug. That's going to connect into the loom for the coils. And you can see here, which is becoming a popular option, the smart coil. So also known as an IGN-1A. Many different manufacturers make them, including ourselves. So they're a high output smart coil, so they've got their own igniter in them, much higher spark delivery, much higher amperage compared to a factory LS coil. So that's a very popular upgrade, especially on big RPM or boosted applications, nitrous motors, anything that's running a lot of fuel and a lot of air through that engine. So this basically allows you to plug directly into the factory LS loom. These are obviously available separately, so it doesn't have to be with our replacement loom, but you can plug straight into the engine loom. Then you've got the male plugs that are terminated to suit the smart coil, the IGN-1A, but it also has, which is a requirement considering the amount of output these coils have, an additional heavy gauge ground wire. So that's going to have to be run. You can just run a little spade terminal or a circle terminal straight down onto the cylinder head, for example, that will ground, provide additional ground so that you're not draining all of the ground out of the engine harness, which with the amount of output and discharge that these coils have can sometimes backfeed or cause issues with the rest of the ECU. So make sure if you are using that sub harness, you are fitting that extra ground. In addition to obviously the smart coil upgraded harness, we do also have, I'm going to skip a little bit here, we've got the standard LS style sub harnesses. So this is a LS3 style coil or a Gen 4 style coil. We have the sub harness here with the coil plugs on those, and that plugs into either the loom directly, or as you can see here, this is the extension. So if you're relocating the coils, a lot of people may want to put their coils somewhere other than on the rocker covers, on the valve covers, which brand new plugs, it's always a little bit difficult. There we are. So that's the extension. That's one of the two extensions. We also have the longer extension as well. So this would be if you're moving from, say, the cylinder heads with the coils to just, say, below, mounting it on a subframe or over on a strut tower. It's not very far away. We also have a much longer version that allows you to relocate them, say, to the plenum chamber or even under the dash inside the firewall, just to go for that clean look. So again, direct fit into standard looms, factory or our aftermarket unit. So the O2 sensor plug that comes on this is a male. Now, we had to choose one way or the other. In Australian delivered vehicles, some have a female plug, some have a male plug. They change depending on what the production date was. I'm assuming what was available as far as the sensors are concerned. This female style plug is designed for an LSA O2 sensor or a later gen O2 sensor, where the sensor itself will have the male end. So what we've done is we've created this extension that converts ours from a male on the loom side. Plug that in, and then you've got the female on the other side. So then your factory O2 sensor will plug straight in. If you have an O2 sensor with the female plug like this, it will plug directly into the one that's already on the loom. So that's just a couple of things that you've got to keep an eye out for. We also have other variations on the extensions. So if you've got some extractors and you're moving the position of the O2 sensor, they have these longer extensions as well, so you can move it down, move it further down. So as we spoke about earlier with the drive-by-wire throttle body, this is the original loom plug that will plug straight into the factory drive-by-wire throttle body. This is our 102mm drive-by-wire throttle body. Exactly the same plug on there, so you can plug it directly onto that one. Or alternatively, if you're, say, mounting this on, if your engine's got a high ram intake and the throttle body sits up higher, that original loom length won't be long enough. So you can just plug it straight into our extension loom. So that is going to go onto the throttle body, as you can see there. And then the extension will just come down into the main loom. We also have a map sensor here. So map sensor plug. Again, that is the later model map sensor that will plug straight into that. We have these as the original Bosch item, the GM Bosch item, as a 2.7 bar map sensor, which is a great upgrade if you're going from naturally aspirated to boosted. So whether it's supercharged or turbocharged, this will give the ECU higher resolution and further range to see what the pressure is inside the manifold. So that map sensor is available separately. Does not come with the loom, I should point out, but it's available separately and that'll plug straight in there. So that's all the drive-by-wire system. Moving on to the rest of the loom, there's not a great deal else here that is out of the ordinary. So you'll have cam sensor, you'll have knock sensor plugs. They're all basically standard replacement. We do have an adapter for cam relocation. So if you're going from a Gen 3 to Gen 4, we've got the extension to move from the front to the back or vice versa. We also have the knock sensor relocation plugs as well. So if you're deleting the top and putting one of our billet valley plates, for example, on a Gen 3 motor, you don't need those knock sensors up there. You might be using the ones in the side of the block like a Gen 4. We have that relocation kit as well. So everything else, we've already gone over the other cylinder head with the injectors. If you're not using those direct plugs, which you can see here, we have little pigtail adapters for your injector as well. So that's a US car injector to a Bosch loom in a pigtail version. So depending on the style that you prefer and how much space you've got, sometimes these extensions make the whole combination a bit too long to fit in the space, but they're all available as well. So the long and the short of it is that Aeroflow Performance has you covered when it comes to an LS wiring loom solution and all of the relevant adapters to get it working in your application. As I've mentioned earlier, this isn't a direct replacement for your complete vehicle loom. So if you have a vehicle that runs one of these engines or this ECU, it's not necessarily going to replace everything that you have. It's going to do engine harness and then basic under dash systems. So please keep that in mind. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to shoot us an email, sales@aeroflowperformance.com. We'll point you in the right direction as best as we can. But aside from that, you can get out, keep working on that project. You'll find these at your local distributor, your quality retail outlet, or online at aeroflowperformance.com.